Dungeon Kart, SCHiM, and Quake. This is staying in.
Pete, are you having a Brat Summer?
What? Stop. Right, hold on. Can I just get a clarification before you answer this, please, Pete?
Yep.
Can you just repeat what you said there, Kris?
Pete, are you having a Brat Summer?
A Brat Summer?
A Brat Summer? As in, like, brats as in with a Z, or...
The doll? Yeah, that's what I kind of want to know.
I'm really glad it's not just me that doesn't know what the hell this is. So I came across this the other day. I really do feel that when I ask questions like this, I am kind of letting the listener have a peek behind the curtain about how old we actually are.
Yeah.
Apparently this is the trend for the summer. And it comes from the artist Charlie XCM.
Okay, well, it's XCX.
All right. Now, if I was editing this podcast, I'd make it sound as if I knew exactly what I was talking about. But unfortunately,
but you're not. So
Sam is editing this podcast.
Yeah.
So he's just gonna let it all go. Hang out.
Can you spell it, please? Because I can't understand whether you're saying brat or rat.
B-R-A-T. Brat.
Okay.
Brat.
Right, yeah.
Brat Summer. If you find yourself with a cigarette, makeup smudged, but still effortlessly chic, dancing away the sting of the day's mistakes and unstable relationships, that's a Brat Summer, apparently, folks.
Right. So if your life's a bit of a mess,
Yeah,
But you can still dance,
but you can still dance.
exactly.
then that's okay. Brat Summer.
That's a Brat Summer.
Yeah. Who said this?
Well, apparently everyone apart from us three.
Okay. All right.
Dan would have known.
Dan would have. Yeah, Dan would have.
Of course,
known.
Dan will know.
Dan will know.
He's having it right now.
Yeah, he's having okay, so are we saying that people have a right Brat Summer, or is it or a really Brat Summer, or is it just a Brat Summer and that sort of covers the whole sort of pantheon of summers?
I don't think there are degrees of brattiness. I think it's you've either got it or you haven't.
Right.
And clearly, us three haven't had a Brat Summer.
No, I've got a day job. Yeah. All right. Well.
According to Glamour UK, Brat Summer is an aesthetic and a way of life.
So it's like a philosophy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely not something that will be said for the next 6 weeks and then forgotten about for the rest of time. It's definitely a way of life. Like Epicureanism or Stoicism or nihilism. It's Brat Summer.
Well, it's kind of this interesting kind of thing you get where people are trying to take a term that is typically used as something insulting and reclaim it as something that is something that one would want to aspire to have, really.
What was that one that was recently? Was it Goblin Core? I want to go full Goblin. What was it?
I think I heard some younger folks saying this phrase as well. Yeah, Goblin
mode.
Yeah, Goblin mode. That's it. Yeah.
This is literally going to be what we're going to sound like when we record the podcast in our 80s.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, Goblin mode is also a real way of life, isn't it?
It is a real way of life. But it was also, in my day, just called just chilling out.
Yeah, just relaxing.
In my day.
So the behaviour of someone who wants to feel comfortable and do or eat whatever they want, not caring about trying to be clean, healthy or attractive, or about pleasing or impressing other people. That's generally my Saturday evenings. Like, I don't know why anyone needed to go, right, go full Goblin mode this evening.
I know.
Right.
It's like there's this with God, we sound old. With language, there's this emphasis into that I've noticed recently, where people will use phrases to make things sound more important than they are. Right. The other day. Somebody said to me, I recently bought, I think it was like an inflatable chair or something like that. I recently bought this inflatable chair. Oh yeah, it's been an absolute game changer. And I'm like, I don't, like, words like that just really, or another phrase that I've heard a lot, I'm going to pull the trigger on that one. And it's like, I'm going to pull the trigger on a ham and egg sandwich, right? Like it's not like everything seems like it's got so much more emphasis and weighting to it.
I can understand, right? I can slightly get behind Goblin mode because there's part of me that thinks, oh, what did you do at the weekend? Oh, I just chilled out. I accidentally ate a whole tube of Pringles. I was playing Baldur's Gate, or you can just say, I went full Goblin mode, and it would just be like a shorthand to say, right, yeah, I get it. You don't need to go into any more detail.
Yeah, your life's a mess.
Yeah.
But speaking from the point of view of someone such as myself who doesn't use contractions in WhatsApp messages, I would say that there is a lot of hyperbole. People are playing fast and loose with the language, which, to be honest, I don't mind to a degree because language is this wonderful organic thing with its ebbs and flows. But when people start using absolutist terms, they are the worst. I mean, really? The worst?
Yeah, somebody the other day said somebody the other day said to me something like, "Oh, I really hate those sweets." Like, just like, oh, cool. Like, I can't go there with you. I can't.
I just want to know more about why buying an inflatable chair is a game changer.
Sam, it was a game changer. And I was just like, for what?
Because I remember that craze in the late 1900s, early 2000s, where literally everything was inflatable for a period of time. Like, I remember going to numerous friends' houses, and there'd be inflatable chairs, there'd be inflatable beds, there'd be inflatable sofas.
Yep.
There was inflatable absolutely everything.
I have a vivid memory when I was about 15 with my schoolmates going down a river on an inflatable sofa. That's just come back to me now. And I remember it vividly because there was one point where it was very nice and relaxing until we saw a weir.
Have you played Quake?
Have I played Quake? Have I?
The original?
Let me... Hold
Go on, do a little Googles.
I've just been Googling because Quake came out in 1996, original Quake.
Correct.
And what a year. Can I just reel off the games that came out in 1996? We were very, very lucky boys.
Please do.
Super Mario 64.
Okay.
Tomb Raider.
Yep.
Resident Evil. Mario Kart 64.
Ooh.
Command and Conquer Red Alert.
Oh. To the moon!
Crash Bandicoot. Parappa the Rapper.
Oh.
Gotta believe.
The Mortal Kombat trilogy.
No.
What an incredible year.
It's a great year.
And Quake is nestled amongst them.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great year. 97, 98, I think, might just pit them. There was something in the water around that period of time, though. And yeah, like Quake came out in 96. It's the people who made Doom, if you have played that one as well. And it's like the spiritual successor to Doom. And really, in my opinion, it's the spiritual successor to Doom 2, because of the way that it kind of like builds out. But basically, first-person shooter and classic old-school first-person shooter. So if you've not played a first-person shooter before, let's say Half-Life, maybe GoldenEye, then if you've not played a shooter like that, you kind of don't know what they're like, I would say, because they are very different. They are closer to these new school set of shooters called retro shooters, of which you see things like a Medieval, and also we reviewed a game called Ion Fury on the podcast a little while ago as well. Those sorts of games, basically. They play much closer to those games. So yeah, I mean, like, so Kris, you didn't play it. Sam, did you ever actually get a chance to play this one back in the day?
Quake? Don't think so.
No?
I think I played Quake 2.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit of Arena. But I wasn't really cognizant of what it was and how important it was at the time.
It just looked very, very dark.
And it is. So it's Romero and Carmack basically have just finished up on Doom 2. Doom 1 really, I think some other people were finishing up Doom 2, and they were building a new engine that was going to do full 3D, right? So Doom is 3D sorta, and it's blisteringly fast. But actually, 3D models and stuff like that was actually that wasn't easy to run on machines. And to be fair, Carmack is a genius. He's a technical genius. I'm sure he probably still is as well. But at the time, he was absolutely revolutionizing engines. And indeed, this continues to be built on something called idTech. Quake is it's going to sound really antiquated when I tell you about it. You find coloured keys that open doors. You find hidden secrets, so things that people have hidden away. You get power-ups. So we're not even talking about like Call of Duty-esque, you run over someone's gun and that gives you some ammo for your weapon. No, none of that. You run over floating symbols that express to you, this is a power-up. They are much closer to mushrooms from Super Mario Brothers than they are to armor packs even in GoldenEye, really. And each level is essentially a puzzle that you solve through violence, and it takes a lot of its steers from Doom 2 in terms of its level design. So Doom 2 and Quake have level design theory that basically keeps them quite tight and compact. Like, you'll go over the same spaces again and again and again, and you can usually tell that you're making progress because there's a new enemy to fight that you haven't killed yet, or you're thinking, oh, actually I went over I've already been here because there's some gore on the floor already, or I've picked up all of the power-ups. And the when I was playing it, did you ever, when you were a kid, when you were in school, did you play a game called Levels, where you'd get like graph paper and you'd draw out levels for your friends to try and like complete? Like you get, right, you have to start here. How do you go through it?
Yeah.
No, I'm really interested in this. So what would that look like? When you say they've got to complete that, would they just talk about how they would do it? Or
how they would go through it, yeah.
Interesting. I really love that as a game.
You draw out these levels, right? And you do that sort of thing. And really, the challenge was, can you outthink your friends, right? We talk about this we've talked about this kind of thing before with whenever we talk about RPGs, especially old RPGs. You're really outthinking the dungeon, right? Outthinking the level. And that's the same, I think, in Quake as well. And indeed, Carmack and Romero were really inspired by Dungeons and Dragons. In fact, they were running a campaign that I think ran for like 10, 15, 20 years. I think they were deep into this at that point, and that really inspired, I think, their level design, because essentially what you have is a group of different level creators, of which they include obviously John Romero is one of them, who would famously go on to make some not very good games afterwards, but made Doom. American McGee was a level designer for this. So this is American McGee's Alice, for example. You might remember that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that American McGee provided level design. A guy called Sandy Peterson, who you might recognise from our favourite game, Call of Cthulhu. He created Call of Cthulhu.
Oh, wow.
And there were a bunch of other creators as well, level designers as well. But each of these levels is you trying to outthink John Romero or Sandy Peterson or whoever. And there's a small number of enemies. There's maybe 8, 9 types of enemies. Like, again, this is feeling really bare bones, really like limited, right? But what they do with the small number of mechanics and the level design philosophy that they have is incredible. This is a game that stretched for me. So I played this on Steam Deck because did I tell you I've got a Steam Deck?
Oh, you've not got a Steam Deck, have you?
I've got a Steam Deck. And I played this on Steam Deck, and it was about 10 to maybe 12 hours. Definitely did some save scumming, like quick save, quick load, quick save, quick load sort of stuff, because there's some really hard bits in that game as well. Everything is brown and grey and mottled, and it really set the tone, I think, for a lot of shooters that would come later, especially...
Yeah, sure.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I always imagined that as a kid, the way I could tell Doom and Quake apart was Doom was red and Quake was kind of browny grey.
Yep. And so the really fascinating thing when you go and look at the history of this thing, so I kind of read this book a little while ago, a couple of books about how Doom got made and how id Software kind of imploded, and sort of didn't, but that friendship between Romero and Carmack imploded. When they were making Quake, they actually gave all the level designers their own sets, and they realized that they'd made essentially 3 or 4 different games with different themes. And then when they were like, oh no, we've got to ship this thing in like not very long, so they just glommed them all together. And Quake actually feels part medieval Cthulhu-esque weird universe where you're trying to destroy Shib-Niggurath, I believe she's called, which clearly is like a Sandy Peterson, Romero kind of a thing. But also you're playing as a heavily armored space marine, and then there's also there's like the walls will have decorated, big skulls with flaming sconces, but then there'll also be like computer banks. And the whole thing doesn't really mesh together, except it does. Like, it doesn't feel like it should, but it all kind of blurs together in this really weird thing that they would never repeat. So Quake 2 is actually where Quake finds its own identity and like becomes its own separate thing. But Quake 1 is really different and strange for that.
So are you playing a remastered version of this? Because there is a Quake remastered.
Yes.
And the question I wanted to ask with that, aside from, as you say, the lots of saving you're doing, which by the way, I'm doing a lot with Tomb Raider.
Yeah.
What else is remastered about this, if that makes sense? Because from what I've looked at screenshots of this version of Quake, they've not like pimped up the graphics in any particular manner at all. It feels like you're just playing the original game. Yeah,
so the lighting's better. So, for example, there's RTX mode. So if you've got a fancy pants graphics card, not even that fancy pants anymore, you can do better shadows, you can do better lighting, you can do all that good stuff. It's got native controller support, so you don't have to muck around doing all that sort of stuff. So it works beautifully on Steam Deck. It just immediately works. The remaster comes with... It comes with something like 3 major expansion packs and then like some extra exclusive levels that were never released anywhere else. I've not played any of those because I just didn't care to, because I wanted to play the original Quake. It comes with the Quake multiplayer, and it has servers, and it has dedicated servers to do all of that good stuff, but you can also like play with your friends as well if you want to, like peer-to-peer. It has higher resolutions that you can access, so obviously the original doesn't go up to 4K, but you can absolutely do that with this one. And it, again, remains blisteringly fast. And obviously it should, because it's 96 game, right? But it's been remastered beautifully by Night Dive, which they do a lot of these kinds of remasters. And they've picked some really odd games to do. I think they're just big fans of retro shooters, but the version that they did with Quake is really, really good. But the thing I think that I took from Quake is it's so different, lads. In video games today, we get a lot of first-person shooters, right? Like, we get a lot of them, and that's like, and that's lovely. And indeed, Quake and Doom and stuff like that, they really popularized the FPS genre to go off and do different things. You need to play this. I really believe that you need to go back and play a game like Quake every once in a while, or a game like Doom every once in a while, because you can see things in it that are the sort of genetic lineage of where games have come, but also what we've left behind. And there's things in those games, I think, that we've left them behind. And I think this is why this sort of retro shooter renaissance is happening, because I think we've lost some of the sheer fun, and I would also say some of the danger of games like Quake. Quake has a soundtrack by Nine Inch Nails. They are not pulling any punches. It is dark and somber and grim, and like, there's all sorts of mad stuff that happens in these games. Like, it is deliberately, and at the time it was ultra violent. It's not one of these like edgelord games, right? It's not like a game where you go, I'm so moody and like, look how deep I am. Like, it's so...
Yeah, I know the one you mean.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not that. It's just full on, this is violence. This is darkness. This is a twisted hellscape. Like, it's meant to be that. It's all browns and greys and dark red lighting and like all of that sort of stuff. But at the same time, it's super fun. Like, it's super like...
It's not wallowing.
It's not wallowing in it. It's like grabbing you by the collar and just being like, this is what I am. What it does with its few enemies and its few weapons and its technical constraints, God, like it gets so much out of them, and it's just so refreshing to play a game like this. It's a heavy metal album. It's like,
yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
You know what I mean?
So there is a very short puzzle game that I really want to talk about,
Right.
but I promised Dan I wouldn't because Dan really wants to talk about it. So we're going to talk about it next time, in the next ep.
Is it a puzzle game?
It's a puzzle as to why I keep wanting to replay it over and over again. Maybe that's the puzzle I need to unravel.
It's currently my game of the year.
What game are we talking about?
Well, it's a secret, isn't it?
It's a secret. We can't talk about it until Dan's here. Dan's on holiday, having his Brat Summer.
But thank goodness.
Thank goodness,
When he's here, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Okay. It's Cyberpunk, isn't it? So what do you want to talk about instead?
I want to talk about a game that Sam and I have been excited about for a while. I've not played it, but Sam has and completed it. It's still clogging up my Instagram feed because it just looks really, really interesting. And that is it SCHiM? How do you pronounce it, Sam? SCHiM or SCHiM?
Don't know.
How shall we pronounce it for this episode?
Yeah.
SCHiM.
SCHiM.
SCHiM is so SCHiM is a video game where you play as a thing. I'm assuming the thing is a SCHiM because you can buy the SCHiM plushie on the SCHiMgame.com website. So you play as this SCHiM, and to be honest, I don't know how much I want to say about SCHiM because I was really surprised by how it actually went about basically delivering the gameplay, and actually, what I thought was just going to be a puzzle game actually turned out to be quite a touching exploration of one man and his shadow. And I found that really surprising because I hadn't really seen that in any of the marketing that had happened around the game. My whole compulsion to buy was around the main sort of mechanic of the game is that you explore the world by jumping from shadow to shadow. Essentially, you are a shadow, and the only way that you can move throughout the world is by either existing within or jumping from shadow to shadow. So if you miscue a jump, or you get lost along the way and end up being exposed to sunlight, you get reset and get sent back to the last shadow that you were currently in. You got to start again. And what it creates is almost a completely horizontal platformer. And there are some levels in SCHiM which I either found a sheer delight to just explore, or I found really elegant in terms of how they build their puzzles together. So to give you an example without kind of trying to ruin so much of the experience for anyone. So like imagine a platformer like Mario or something like that. And you'd be standing on a platform, and quite a typical Mario thing is you're waiting for a traveling platform to come your way. You jump on it, and then you'd use that platform to then make your way through the rest of the level.
Yeah.
Okay.
That little bit of verticality, that little bit of exploration during the platform. In SCHiM, you do exactly the same thing, but instead of a platform, you'll be waiting for a person walking by. So all the levels are displayed in this wonderful high contrast style art, and pretty much every level takes place around sort of sunrise or sunset.
Oh, great. So long shadows.
So if I need to make my way from one side of the screen to the other, and there's people walking by, just generally just doing their own thing, but casting shadows as they go, I can hop into that shadow, get moved along within it, and then hop out when I need to get to my next bit.
Okay.
And then things get trickier where it turns out there's not people, but there's bikes. And suddenly the bikes are moving and I've got to jump on the bike at the right time and then jump out at the right time. And then things get even more complicated when there's traffic and I'm doing it from car to car to car. And it's a little bit like Frogger sometimes, but you're doing it from shadow to shadow to shadow. And what you're also trying to do quite a lot in the game is to manipulate where those shadows are in order to move around the world. So to give you another example, is there's a level that takes place in a sort of like a fulfillment factory. So you start off from like basically moving from shadows of boxes and boxes and boxes, and then you'll get to a point where you're in the shadow of a forklift and you're like, right, how do I, and you can see that there's some shadows over at the top of the screen. You're just like, right, so how do I get from this forklift here to the top of the screen? Well, when you're in a shadow, you have some level of interactivity with the object that you're inhabiting. Most of the time, that's kind of, for some reason, you make people sneeze, which is good. Like you just press a button when you're in the shadow and they just stop and they sneeze. Or like you ring the bell of the bike or you honk the horn of the car or whatever.
Right.
But I found out that when you're in this forklift, you press it and the forklift starts raising its forks. So if you're in the right part of the shadow, you suddenly go from the bottom of the level to the top of the level using the shadow of the forks as they go up, and then you can then jump into the next part of the screen.
Amazing.
And the game does this time and time again in how it wants you to really manipulate the space and find new ways of exploring the world and get from A to B. It can be frustrating at times, mainly because there's no real way of like zooming out and sort of trying to get a picture of a level in its entirety, which sometimes would help, but I understand why they didn't do that, because it would completely destroy the puzzle, because right, I've just got to get there and I can just go to sort of retrace my steps. But when you're just doing like bonkers things, like in a pond, jumping from the shadows of fish to fish to
that's
fish
cool.
just to get out the other side of the pond, or using the shadow of a fountain as it's leaping out of the pond to get you also out of the pond.
That's really cool.
Or, getting an elephant to extend its trunk so you can use that shadow to then reach over at the other part of the game. There's just this whole feeling of, interacting with the world, but it also feels really vicarious at the same time. And you really have this feeling of being a part of the world, but also a really hidden part of the world. And I'm going to say something, probably quite douchey about shadows, but like,
go
on. Shadows are really beautiful, but they're very, very underrated.
Yeah.
What? Okay.
Wow.
What does that mean?
Well, I just mean it's like SCHiM is just one of those games, right? That you just like, I think you just get slightly indoctrinated into this world of shadows, right? And it's just like, it's like that Peter Pan-esque, like that real childlike sensibility of really believing that shadows are another world. My young son, like Hugo, doesn't really understand what shadows are, and it's like, even though I tell him that it's the sun,
but you can't get all the way through the explanation because you just break down in tears.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I had a similar thing with like when I played Flower, right? Like,
oh yeah.
When it's that thing of like, oh, actually, isn't the breeze beautiful? And it's one of these moments where you go, oh, it is really beautiful.
I remember that, Pete, because you, I think, were one of the first people I know who was nearby who had a PlayStation 3, and I remember coming round to yours. all I wanted to do was play Flower, because that sensation of being the breeze.
It was so good.
It's all I wanted to do. It was incredible. Some question I wanted to ask, just so I'm very clear then, when you're jumping from shadow to shadow, do you have to, so if I'm trying to catch the shadow of someone who's walking past, when I jump into the shadow of them, do I have to move with them and time it, or is it like jumping onto a moving train and then I just hop off?
It's like jumping onto a moving platform.
Right.
It is a platformer that is completely, horizontal, and, there is no verticality to it, really. And yeah, it's quite a short game. I think it took me about 4 or 5 hours to actually get through the quote unquote story. And I put it in quotes because I didn't actually think that there was going to be a story to go with this little shadow. I thought it was just going to be quite sort of Portal-esque and be like, right, here's your entrance, here's your exit, how do you make it from point A to point B? And it has a really nice approach where if you want to, you can get through some levels quite quickly. Some levels literally only take like 10-15 seconds, or you can actually explore levels to find certain objects and give yourself that bit of extra challenge. And then there's the actual core of the game, what I would call like the big sort of levels that I think are where it goes from a bit more of a proof of concept. There's about 3 or 4 of those where it will probably take you a good sort of 20 minutes to really box it out and really think about what your progression is and how you can manipulate the world and how you can go from shadow to shadow. It's so good. I mean, it does not, just at the point where I was getting like, right, are we
done here?
I'm really enjoying this, but I'm kind of like, are we done with shadows now? It finished. I was like, right, okay, brilliant. It knew absolutely when the right time was to stop bumbling around with shadows.
I am definitely buying it. It feels to me that it fills that void that games like Superliminal do. Where
yeah, sure.
There is something of a narrative there, but it's a bit thin. It knows what you want and it delivers, and it's the same mechanic over and over again with a slightly different permutation, which doesn't stretch you too much, but just enough to keep you engaged, waiting for the next level.
One big idea, and then it explores it fully, and then leaves you alone. Like,
absolutely.
Sam and I hung out the other day, Pete.
Why have you got to show off like that?
Well, because it's always good to see my mate.
Yeah, true.
My BM.
Well,
don't say that.
Don't say that, because that doesn't.
Well, you should always check.
Yeah, always check.
Yeah, always check.
And we had a kind of an impromptu themed board game evening, which was all around racing games. It was amazing. Sam bought Cubitos and Heat, which we've spoken about on the pod previously, which are absolutely banging racing games.
Oh, that I am still thinking now about that game of Heat.
That was an incredible game.
How absolutely bonkers it was, yeah, and how like the literal twists and turns, and how much I pushed my car so much to the limit that it literally was like
Ghost Rider's car. By the end,
it was like Ghost Rider's car by the end. Anyway, yeah,
that's great.
But the headline act for me was a game that I'd backed on Kickstarter, which had literally just arrived in the post, which was Dungeon Kart.
Oh, I got advertised this on one of those backer kit things.
Yes,
this is like Mario Kart meets sort of generic fantasy board game racer.
Yeah, I mean that you basically it's almost like you've got my notes in front of you. That is it in a nutshell, Pete. Yeah. So this is within the Boss Monster universe. I've not played Boss Monster. I've seen it a lot in board game shops. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to lie, I wasn't really invested in that. What I wanted was, well, what you were talking about earlier, Pete, which was that sensation of something retro.
Yeah,
the sensation of a Mario Kart, or even better, a Crash Team Racer.
Let's not
go there.
But to have that in a board game. But I'd forgotten I backed this, because one of the reasons I backed this game was cards on the table. I really wanted to play Thunder Road Vendetta, but at the time, last year, it wasn't available. It was sold out everywhere, and then suddenly this Kickstarter appeared, and I thought, well, if I can't have Thunder Road Vendetta, I will back this. Then, lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, Thunder Road announced a Kickstarter, which I backed, and I kind of forgot about this. And obviously I'd get updates and stuff, but my enthusiasm for it had cooled a little bit, because I know I've got Thunder Road arriving this autumn. And I took a quick stock of my collection, and I realised I do have quite a bit of racing games now. And is there a critical mass in terms of how many racing games one can own? Because for me, I love that kind of puzzle. Sam spoke about this a couple of episodes ago, that sense of a reactive game where you can't strategize too far ahead. You've got to live in the moment to a degree and react to it, which is kind of what a driver needs to do in a race, because who knows what's going to happen. If I'm going to hit that corner too hard and too fast, I haven't really thought that far ahead. But equally also, what makes Crash Team Racing and Mario Kart so fun is that the races are pretty quick. Boom, 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 boom. They're these wonderful kind of kaleidoscopes of colour. How does a game that its runtime is roughly 30 to 60 minutes work when you're just doing a single lap of a track? Cards on the table, again, this game does deliver. Okay. I have a lot of fun with this. I've played it a couple of times solo, just to teach myself the rules. And then Sam and I played it. This plays from 2 to 8 players. And Sam and I played it in a rally mode where we basically had 2 cars each, and we clipped onto the back of them a particular colour. So I was red team and Sam was blue team. And this is from Brotherwise Games. And you, akin to a Mario Kart, you are playing a racer and essentially trying to be the fastest racer, working across a variety of different types of track. And the game comes with a ton of different kind of tracks to choose from, which each have a different name with a particular set of conditions within them, which feels very Mario Kart. And we even had like some kind of Mario Kart-esque music playing in the background as we were playing, just to kind of live in that kind of nostalgia kind of buzz. So you begin by selecting a racer at random from 1 to 10, and each racer has 2 different abilities. And then you choose from 8 different dashboards, and each dashboard is essentially a car.
Okay.
So when you in Mario Kart go, okay, I'm going to play as Mario, but I'm going to choose this particular car because this has good traction, or it's good off-road, or it has good acceleration, or it's heavy because already you want to ram into other cars. You've got that here. And they're quite chunky dashboards with a gear lever that kind of moves across them. So you can clearly see what gear you're in. And the number of that particular gear is just how many movement points you've got. And it's very clear, and it's double-sided, so you can kind of see what other number your opponents are setting their gears to, really. You set your track up, and then each track randomly has hazards set up there, which each have their own different setup. So already there's tons of replayability, even if you just play the same track over and over again. And the hazards are very similar to what you would see in a kind of video game racer. And then you begin by setting your speed. So every go you choose to set your gear, and you either set it 1 gear down or 1 gear above. Now you may be thinking, well, it's a racing game. Why do I not set it to the highest? Well, the reason why is because you can only turn once per go. And you can only drift once per go. Now, some players have a particular abilities which they can activate to allow them to turn more than once or to drift more than once. But understanding, okay, right, I can't go too far because otherwise I'm just going to hit that wall because I've already turned at this point. So knowing what your speed is going to be and thinking about, okay, well, I've got to do this now because in my next round I want to be at an advantage when I hit that next bend, is a really interesting kind of puzzle when you're kind of setting your gear. And I think it's quite handy that you can only go up or down a gear. So if you've kind of somehow managed to rank up your speed to the highest, and you're really far ahead, but you can only go down one gear on your next go, and you know you're going to hit something, you're going to crash. And also as well, you may want to detour because players can pick up coins or spell books, very similar to Mario Kart where you pick up rewards. Those coins, you get enough of those coins, you can cash them in and use one of your powers, one of your two powers, a higher power and a lower power. If you get a spell book, this is great. At the end of the round, when everyone's played their go, you look at what the order is, who's at the front, who's at the back. If you've got a spell book, you cash that in. You have to cash that in at the end of the round. Depending on where you are, whether you're near the front or near the back, you pick up a spell card that matches that. If you're at the front, you're going to get a spell card that's good, but it's not going to be as powerful for those who are at the back. Very similar to Mario Kart.
Right,
so there was one moment where Sam had a racer at the back. He picked up like a spell card C, and essentially it just said, okay, ignore all hazards. You're going to move 12 movement points. And it's literally like that bits in Mario Kart where that player at the back rubber bands almost straight to the front, pretty much.
Yeah, it was great.
Particularly now that you can also bump into other players as well, causing them to crash. That's kind of it as a game. You just keep doing that, rinsing and repeating, and you keep going until somebody wins, really. I had a lot of fun playing this. I don't know how you felt, Sam. We didn't really speak about it much because we were kind of jumped straight into Kubitos, didn't we, really?
Yeah. I think there was a big turning point for me when we were playing this, where we were nearing the end of the race and one of us was really far behind and had got a spell book. And I knew at that moment that the result of that spell book was going to sort of really help me make a fair judgment of the game. And it was when that one spell book at that one time completely brought that kart back into contention for the race. I was like, all right, okay, this game has judged this really, really well, because that rubber banding, that feeling like you are never truly out of a Mario Kart race, is both the beautiful and the most frustrating thing about Mario Kart. And that is what it's got to get right, really. The other thing is the feeling of, being in first place and feeling like you are the punching bag, and you can never kind of get up to speed to really do anything, and it gets that, absolutely on the button, like you're just feeling like you're always getting bashed into. You can't really get up to speed. I think if you can sort of sidestep the artwork,
yes,
and just sidestep some of the, I guess what I would call the like overall, some of the maybe unnecessary complexity with it, I think it is a very good addition to anyone's collection who enjoys, what is a racing game. I think I'd like to play it on a bigger map. I think that there needs to be I think the biggest omission of the game is the lack of any sort of AI component to it, because what made our game of Heat so extraordinary is the one thing that they've nailed in that game is how the AI operates, and how the other racers that are just being controlled by random card draws feel like they have personalities, and that they are actually in this race as much as you are. They're not just there for cannon fodder. That we spent the whole race trying to chase them down, and when we overtook them, like, it was moments of joy and jubilation that we'd done that. And I think that having to play this in a way that felt substantial, we had to pair up. But that's a Mario Kart problem as well.
Yeah,
like until the Switch, you always had to play a maximum of like 4 players, on a Grand Prix. If there was only two of you, I remember some versions of Mario Kart where if there was only two of you, you could only play two of you. You couldn't even have simulated bot characters in. So I mean that is fine. This is a game that I really want to come back to, and I really want to play more of, because I think that once you really understand it, and once you get into that rhythm of how the speed and the directions and the drifting and the turn works, which I think we were kind of really getting to by the end of the game, it really does feel like Mario Kart, and that is an exceptional trick to pull off.
It is an exceptional trick, but the question is, and what does this game bring that you couldn't get from playing Mario Kart? Like, what is it that you would do with this? Why would you choose to? Let's say, for example, you've got, you're sat equal distance between a copy of Mario Kart and a copy of this. Why are you going for this rather than Mario Kart?
See, I would go for this
question.
because I have time to plan my movements. It's really interesting. I don't enjoy playing racing games in a video game context at all, really, unless it's kind of silly fun, like
Hot Wheels or
Hot Wheels has been a kind of a mainstay for us when we occasionally multiplayer together online. But typically, I don't like racing games because that first person perspective, or even third person, really doesn't appeal to me, and I'm just not very good at them. Whereas something like this, where it becomes a spatial puzzle, and I've got time to meditate on how many hexes I want to go ahead, when I'm going to turn, when I'm going to drift. Do I head over there to grab that spell book and try and work out how to spend 2 goes maybe turning so I'm pointing in the right direction, as opposed to appeals to me more, really. And it's really interesting, like there's not analysis paralysis here, maybe when you first play it, but once you get into the groove of it, as Sam says, I think that dissipates. So it doesn't get in the way of it feeling like a Mario Kart game, if that makes sense. I think they've got the sweet spot here right. The right level of production and rules complexity. The rule book is very clean and very clear, as is the additional racing guidebook, which I have in front of me here, which details every single hazard, every single spell card, and it's huge. They didn't need to use this many pages on it, but it's so clear and so exacting. It almost doesn't feel like a Kickstarter game, which is probably quite high praise, really.
Yeah.
So I just got a little sort of snippet, and the reasons why it's very little will become clear, because it is a game that I can't really talk much about because I don't want to ruin it, but I just want to encourage people to play it. And it is the sequel to the 2020 hit Spiel des Jahres nominated board game My City.
Okay.
From Dr. Rainer Knizia.
Oh, the Rizzy.
The Rizzy, we're getting busy with the Knizia. The doctor is in the house, people. Ding, ding, ding. Is there a doctor in the house? Yes, there is. It's
Rainer Knizia, and he's bought board games.
He's bought board games. They're not going to help me here.
I would love to see that series of him trying to be a medical doctor, like Diagnosis Murder.
Rainer Knizia, MD.
Yeah.
But basically what I'm encouraging people to do, and this benefits all of us because it gets us people going back into the back catalogue of the podcast, is to go back to episode 110, which is all the way back in 2020, if you can believe it, when me and my wife first played My City, because that is pretty much what the sequel, My Island, is. And I'm just here to say to everyone that there is nothing wrong with that. It is superb. And My Island, which is the sequel to that, is pretty much a follow-up to that as an experience. I'd have to say that, is there really anything that it does to change up the formula, to really move alongside it, to really overcomplicate it, or improve upon it? No. But also, I don't think that was ever the ambition of the designer.
Yeah.
I think it was very much of providing another level of experience, another level of ingenuity and design for a family to come around the table and enjoy that legacy game experience. This is not an adult's version of My City. This is not like, the thinking man's, My City. Is not more complicated than what My City was. My Island is pretty much doing the similar kind of things that My City was doing, just in a different setting. I don't really want to talk about the specifics of what those things are, because the joy of both the games is exploring them and enjoying those surprises as and when you go.
Yeah.
I think my pitch to the listener basically is look at them and see which one you kind of fancy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is the one you pick. If you enjoyed My City, you will enjoy My Island. And if you've already picked up My Island and gone, well, will My City just be the, not babyish, but will it be the easier version of that? No, it's just as brilliant as My Island is. Yeah. And that's all I wanted to say. That's just all I want to say about My Island is everything I said on the podcast 4 years ago, pretty much nearly to the date, stands. And if you went out and bought My City and are looking for something similar, go and get My Island, because it's brill. I will say, I think that if you've not played either of them before, I think that My City is a better place to start. I think it's a little bit clearer in its rules set, but that's about it.
Cool. I mean, if you get nominated for a Spiel des Jahres and you're doing a sequel to the game, you probably don't want to deviate
if it ain't broke
too far, do you?
No, but then I can totally understand if the temptation being, well, let's make this more. Let's make this,
Oh yeah,
more stuff and more complicated, and let's make it, this one's for,
increase the barrier to entry and
yeah, absolutely, and make the rules more sprawling and more difficult and challenging as But no, it's pitched completely at the right level for its audience. And I think the thing that both games do, which is an incredible achievement, is you have this chapter structure, but then you have these episodes within that, and it's totally up to you how much you want to play of the game. Each chapter probably takes about an hour. Each episode probably takes about 20 minutes. So, especially as quote-unquote my first legacy game, if you just want to play 20 minutes of it, well, you just play an episode. Like me and my wife tend to play, like, sit down, should we just do an episode tonight? Yeah, brilliant. Or should we do a whole chapter tonight? Oh, fantastic. The amount of times it's just gone from, oh, let's just do one episode to let's do a whole chapter. Happens more often than not. But that way that the whole game is broken down, so you as a player is in complete control of that pacing and that level of engagement is really exceptional, and I've not seen that in any legacy game beforehand. Like, me and Kris sit down to play Jaws of the Lion, and we don't know whether we're going to be there for an hour, 3 hours.
But also the setup, Sam, as well, for My Island compared to other legacy games is so pronounced.
Yeah, it's fantastic for both of them. It's just, it is a board game designer completely like flexing their muscles in terms of, right, I'm making a legacy game and I'm going to make it accessible. Like, how do I do that? And both the games are shining beacons for how you take a genre which very, very quickly from its inception, from Pandemic Legacy, became very, very bloated and obtuse, to really making it, a now pairing of truly exceptional, accessible family board games.
I've done a U-turn.
Okay.
I think I want to have a Brat Summer. Because going back to the point you were saying, Sam, about it being a philosophy, you're absolutely right. It's about embracing the messiness of life. Charlie XCX defines a brat as someone who's very honest, very blunt, a little volatile. A little volatile, not too much, a little.
What was the core philosophy of the Brats with a Z?
Over to you, Pete.
The philosophy of Brats with a Z. Lip gloss. Lip gloss, lip gloss, lip gloss. That's what it is.
But Kris, here's the issue with basically codifying a philosophy, is you can't now use that as a defense for being awful to people. I'm just a little volatile. It's because I'm a brat.
I've gone full goblin mode. No, sir, I'm afraid you do have to wear trousers in this restaurant.
But I'm a goblin moder.
But it's a lifestyle. Listeners, if you too enjoy shouting at clouds
and crying at shadows,
yeah.
What is wrong with us?
What is wrong with us? Make sure that you're subscribed to or follow or whatever the devil it is that the kids are calling it these days to podcasts, to this podcast specifically, wherever it is that you've heard this. Listener, stayinginpod@gmail.com. Have your children or young people that you are forced to work with said phrases that you don't understand? Please let us know.
We'll decipher them for you.
And we'll nod along with you saying, yeah, I don't like change either. Because that's how I'm feeling. What else? Spotify.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to come to you, Pete, to work out which Nine Inch Nails song should make it onto the Spotify playlist.
Maybe are we going to have some Charlie XCXX on it as well?
I think we need to. She has just released an album called Brat, which makes me think this might be more of a marketing thing than
but it's genius marketing. So this marketing has actually become used by Kamala Harris for her presidency campaign.
Oh, okay. Well,
and they worked. It was. I mean, I can bore you to death with this, but I've read a lot about the marketing of the Brat kind of look of it and how much for something that looks like it's just been thrown together, how much thought went into the different shades of green. And the font they chose.
You could say it's the versed, the Brat versed.
Yes, because you and Pete are going to Germany soon for Essen.
We are. I'm learning German.
Mein Gott.
Not now, Kris. I'm tired.
Yes. So to reiterate, we are Essen. Essen. I think it's technically called Spiel. We're going to be there. So if you're going as well, stayinpod@gmail.com, or you can let us know on social media. We don't really use them all that much, but Instagram is where we put some nice pictures every now and again. We won't flood your feed with nonsense. Because again, we're old, so we don't want it either, so we won't force it on you. What else do we normally say? That's about it, really, isn't it?
Yeah, we didn't really explain the Spotify thing, but if you look at the show notes on your podcast feed of choice, there's links to all the Spotify playlists there. And I do this every time, there's also links to all of the things that we've talked about. So, for example, if we ever talk about a film, I'll usually put a link to the film's website. Same with the games. Same with the board games. There's no commission or anything like that we take on any of those things, unless it's like an Amazon link, in which case sometimes I remember to do it and then sometimes I don't. But generally, we point you to where you can find out more information if you're like, oh, actually, that does sound quite interesting. So give that a go. All right. Well, I will literally be on a beach in a week and a half's time. So,
me too. I'll see you on it.
See you there.
Mine's going to be shingle, though.